406.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 411 from 406. My name is Chewie, and I am joined once again by my brother from another mother, Mr. Pip. How are you, sir?
Well, we're back. I'm great. I'm so excited to be here today. It's been Jesus, how long has it been since we've done a podcast?
You know what? Too long, and that is entirely my fault. I apologize.
I agree. I agree 100%.
The last time we recorded was episode number 54, where we talked about our favorite cop movies, and I posted that to the blog on September 10th. So it was probably like the 8th, 7th,
Wow.
that we did that. So yeah, it's been almost a month, which is entirely too long. So
Oh man. All three people who listen to this, two of them being us, are going to be really pissed about this.
Right. And Dave.
Right. Exactly.
So this is something that I haven't even told you. So I actually did record a podcast on the way to work the other day.
Okay.
And I haven't edited it. And I didn't post it because on my way to work, while I was recording it, I got in a car accident.
What?
Yeah. So I was, and it wasn't anything severe. So I had dropped off my son at school, and I take him, I take one son to one school, another son to the other school, and then I drive down to my office. And so I go kind of back roads, and the guy in front of me, slammed on his brakes and put on his left blinker. And so I wasn't like right behind him. I wasn't tailgating him or anything. I put on my right blinker and I went to, move over the lanes. And there was this car right in my blind spot. And I just like sideswiped.
Oh, no.
Of course, it's like this big, beautiful Mercedes. His car was it was fine. I mean, I scraped it. My car was actually pretty messed up. Like my whole front kind of quarter panel is kind of all mushed in. And like when I open the door, it makes this terrible, like metal on metal grinding, just terrible sound. But
Oh, exactly what you mean.
yeah. So, I mean, it's terrible. So yeah, that podcast has been recorded, but I don't know that I will ever, I actually listened back to it. You can't really even hear it because again, I'm probably going 23 miles an hour. I mean, it wasn't,
I can just imagine you being in the middle of a thought, like, oh shit, and then
yeah. So the podcast actually was, so I watched WWE Extreme Rules the other night, and so I was doing it. I was doing a recap of Extreme Rules. Maybe one of these days I'll edit that and I'll get it out. But yeah. So barring that little bit of excitement, how's everything with you guys? Good.
Yeah, everything's good.
Yeah.
Everything just kind of wrapping up the summer. The girls are in school full swing right now. And so, we're just still trying to navigate all the crazy COVID protocols and things like that. My oldest has to, or I should say my youngest has to stay home from school tomorrow and she's in daycare. Someone in her class got COVID. And as a result, her sister has to stay home too. Because the rule at the daycare is that if there is a sibling, that the sibling has to stay home. Now, my oldest is not in daycare, but she does before and after school care. So she's not even allowed to go to the daycare for the before and after school care because of this sibling rule, which is something that I guess has been in place for a while, but I didn't know and we haven't had to deal with yet. So it's pretty bizarre.
Wow, that's crazy. So this is your older daughter has to stay home.
No, she doesn't. No, the younger daughter has to stay home. The older daughter can't go to before and after school care because she's a sibling, even though the younger one doesn't have COVID, doesn't have symptoms. She just has exposure to somebody in the class. So it's exposure to exposure, which isn't really
wow.
thing.
I mean, that's crazy. Yeah.
I mean,
So I mean,
and I get it. Like I'm not one of those people who's gonna throw a massive fit about it. It seems a little bit extreme to me, but it is what it is. I think it's fine to be safe, but I'm
yeah.
not sure that even in the midst of the pandemic at its worst, that kind of thing would be a necessary measure. But it's fine. It's not
Yeah,
a big issue.
it's funny. I don't want to turn this into COVID talk, but I was having a conversation with some buddies today, and I asked a question, and I didn't ask it to be a smartass. I asked it because I was honestly curious. So I saw an article today. There's like several countries that have like just opened shit up. Like there's no more restrictions. They're just like Sweden and Norway. And I understand that, the United States is way bigger and it's this and the other thing. But I was just asking the question, like, why are we different? Like, is there just more COVID here? Or is it because there's a bunch of assholes that just like are playing the freedom card? I don't know. It's just interesting. It just seems like we are doing this worse than like anybody else, which is, I don't know. It's just weird.
It's hard to tell, but yeah. I mean, I don't mind playing a little bit more conservative when it comes to that, just to do my part best I can.
I would agree. I would agree.
So, but as we get started here, I know this is where you're going. Tell me a little bit about this podcast topic, because this is one that I put on your shoulders, which I love to do because it makes you squirm, because for some reason you just struggle so much with coming up with a podcast topic. So it's fun for me to do this, for the record.
Right. Yeah.
So I made you pick this time. Tell our audience what you chose and why.
Yeah. So this one, we are doing what I refer to as definitive roles. And so years ago, actually on the 406 blog, back in August of 2009, I wrote a blog post called Definitive Roles. And basically what this is, and I will tell you kind of how I came to this just recently as well. This is when you think of an actor or an actress, this is the role that you immediately think of. So like to use a TV example, I would say Jennifer Aniston, and you would most likely say Rachel Green from Friends, right? It's not necessarily the best role. It's not necessarily the best performance. It is just in your opinion, the definitive role of that particular actor or actress's career. And where the reason I thought of this actually was a conversation that you and I were having, and I don't remember exactly where it was. We were talking about RoboCop, and I started thinking about the actor Peter Weller, I believe his name is.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, that dude is RoboCop, right? Like it's like when you say that guy's name, that's what I think of. And so that was kind of the genesis for this, even before I remembered that I had written this blog post way back when. So I don't know that this is a traditional kind of top 5 per se, at least for me. But I have 5. I've got plenty of them. But I thought that this would be kind of interesting, and it would be interesting too to see how many overlaps we had. Yeah, sure. I know we kind of love to play this overlap game, and then there are some, there are some actors that are kind of, for lack of a better analogy, a one-hit wonder, right? They are so known for that one role because every other role that they've played has been garbage, right? There might be a couple on this list that we might differ on too. So I don't know. We'll see. This could either be really interesting or it could crash and burn. But we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, no, I think it's an interesting topic. It was definitely a little bit more of a challenge to kind of think through this, because it is a little bit of a broad category. I think the way that I sort of approached it was I maybe reversed engineered it a little bit, and I thought, okay, so I took an actor and I thought of their role, and then but I had to make sure that I thought about it from the perspective of, could anybody else play this role? Would I ever in my mind let that happen and still be able to enjoy this movie with that person in the role? Like, could it possibly be there? So like RoboCop is an interesting example that I would probably disagree with, because yes, Peter Weller was definitely most known for doing RoboCop, but I also think you could put almost anybody in that suit and still have a good movie and an effective character. So I don't know if I'm thinking about it incorrectly or differently from the way that you had sort of envisioned it, but that's sort of like I sort of looked at it from both sides of the coin, I guess.
Okay. And, that's actually really interesting. I can tell you, like, I have never thought about it that way, but I think that'll make this maybe even more interesting, because Yeah, I don't know. That's a really, really interesting take. And I don't know if that's my bad for not explaining it better, or maybe it's even better that I didn't articulate it as well.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah, we'll kind of get into it and see how things go.
All right. Well,
All
this
right.
is your topic, sir. Why don't you kick us off?
Okay. So I guess we'll start with actually the one that, so after I came up with this topic, I said, okay, I did revisit my blog post, and I'll link it in the show notes. But I said I needed to, where am I going to start? And I was flipping through the channels, and I ran across the movie called The Patriot, starring Mel Gibson. And it's and my pick is not Mel Gibson, but I'll get to kind of how I got there. There's an actor in that movie that plays Mel Gibson's son. It's an actor by the name of Heath Ledger. And in my mind, Heath Ledger is the Joker. That is Heath Ledger's definitive role. Now, going at it by your kind of your viewpoint, that's not to suggest that the Joker can't be played by any other person. But in my mind, when I think of Heath Ledger, that's the first role that I think of. I think of his absolutely amazing portrayal of the Joker in The Dark Knight.
Yeah, obviously cannot disagree with that. It was one of the most impressive things that he ever did. And he was a really, really good actor. He had a lot of roles that I thought were really good in the movies that I saw him in outside of that movie. But that one is the one that I think will go down as his legacy. And I believe he posthumously won Best Supporting Actor. I think he won an Academy Award for that.
I don't think he got.
Or he at least won the Golden Globe. You might have to fact check
I don't
me
know
on
that he got. Yeah, I don't know that he got Best Actor, but yeah, he did win. He did win something for that. And that's a film. God, I mean that film is amazing. I mean, I know it has shown up on several discussions and several podcasts.
Oh yeah.
I not just greatest comic movies, not just greatest sequels. I mean, it's just top to bottom. That's an amazing movie. And honestly, I mean, his portrayal in there, in my mind, is a big part of that. Batman is an amazing character. In my mind, the Joker is probably certainly one of the top 2 or 3 villains of all time. And again, that's not to take anything away from any of the other portrayals over the years of the Joker, whether it's Jack Nicholson or Cesar Romero or what have you. In my mind, though, Heath Ledger is the best Joker.
Yeah, I mean, I agree for sure he's the best Joker. I think the argument could be made that Jack Nicholson was better. He was different though, so I don't think it's necessarily apples to apples. And there have been other people who have tried that I don't know that it has resonated in the same way. I will say that it's interesting that it could have ended up a very different way because there were other famous people that were, at least rumored to be cast for the Joker in The Dark Knight. So Paul Bettany, who was Vision in the Marvel movies, as well as Sean Penn at one point, I think was considered for the Joker, which, I'm sure all of those would have been great, but I don't see anybody topping, seeing now what we know that Heath Ledger is capable of in such an iconic role and an iconic performance. I don't think anybody would have done any better.
All right, so we're off and running. What do you got for your number 5, sir?
All right, this is one that I do feel like we'll overlap on. I don't know where in the list we will, and you kind of set the stage that we're not really doing a top 5. I sort of framed my list as being a top 5, so I'm going to work from the bottom up. And this is going to be one that's going to be a little bit of an eye roller, I think, for anybody who's listened to me pine about everything that I love about Jack Burton. But Kurt Russell, to me, is Jack Burton. I just think that, and I hesitate to say that, especially when I'm thinking of it from the way that you sort of framed all this, because I'm sure that when Kurt Russell, passes away, and I will shed many tears when that happens, he probably won't wish for Jack Burton to be the character that he's remembered for, because I think he is a really, really good actor, and he's been in a ton of roles and he's never done anything poorly. But, the film is notoriously a bomb, and a lot of fans recognized it as a sort of a cult movie that really took off on home video back in the late 80s, and obviously Big Trouble in Little China. And I mean, what haven't we said about our favorite 80s reluctant mullet wearing superhero, right? I mean, from the look to the swagger, no one does it better than Jack Burton. And I can't think of a character that I've watched as many times as him that still makes me laugh. And as I eagerly await, the next upcoming one-liner. And I will admit that as much as I love The Rock, when I heard the rumors about them rebooting or recasting The Rock as Jack Burton, I threw up in my mouth a little bit. I think it's such a terrible idea to do anything but make a true sequel to this movie, which I still think they could do. I don't think they ever will, just because it can't be done without John Carpenter. But Kurt Russell is Jack Burton. He is, and nobody could ever replace that in my mind.
Could not agree with you more. Kurt Russell is Jack Burton. He has some other really good roles. He's got some really other iconic roles. In fact, in our last podcast, we talked about Tango and Cash.
Yeah.
Gabriel Cash is another one. But again, if you say Kurt Russell, I say Jack Burton. I agree with you 100%. That to me is kind of the epitome of what this list is, right? It's like I might even throw a couple at you at the end, just kind of rapid fire. I'll give you a name and you tell, and that's kind of the epitome of what this list is.
Ooh, I like that idea. So, I was trying to think of a good rapid fire idea, and I'm a little bummed I didn't do that, but that's a great idea.
Okay. All right. So this one I think might have. There's two roles that this particular person is known for. And I could understand where somebody might make an argument for the other one that I'm choosing, but Harrison Ford is Han Solo. You can make an argument about Indiana Jones. He is Han Solo in my mind. And again, you can make an argument about Henry Jones, but I don't think you could put it, to use your kind of framing, you couldn't put anybody else in Han Solo. I do think you probably could plug somebody else in there and make him Henry Jones. We have gone on probably for more hours than any other topic on this podcast thus far about Star Wars. And even in those movies that we didn't really care for when we did deep dives on the sequel trilogy, we both raved over the performance and the scenes that Harrison Ford was in as Han Solo. And that's one to me that, he's my favorite character. He's my favorite character in every movie that he's in. I can't tell you how many books and novels that I've read about him. I don't even remember any of the plots anymore, but I love that character. And when I'm reading Han Solo on the page, I'm always picturing Harrison Ford in my mind. I know he's probably one of the most well-accomplished box office actors in the history of cinema. So he clearly has other roles, but to me, he is Han Solo.
So I'm going to say something that you may take some level of umbrage with, and I'm prepared for this. So I'll give it a shot. But I agree with you 100%. And I think debate over whether Han Solo or Indiana Jones is more iconic is a great one. But I would agree with you. And one of the things that I would use to support your position here, my list is comprised of people who you couldn't put anybody else in that role and have it be successful. And I will say that the movie Solo really proved that for me. And not because I think it's a terrible movie, but as I'm watching this movie, the one thing that's just not there for me is the actor who played Han Solo, which I don't remember his name. It just didn't resonate with me because it doesn't have the same kind of appeal. He didn't sound like him. He didn't feel like him. Nothing was there. So it just felt like another sort of generic Star Wars story to me. And I don't think it was a bad movie. I think it was probably in the lower half of the ones that I will ever revisit. But I think that the fact that Harrison Ford was not a part of that, which for obvious reasons he couldn't be, really took away from what could have been a really awesome story. Like, can you imagine what a Han Solo movie would have been in like the mid 80s if they'd have done a post Return of the Jedi, just a Han Solo movie? A solo movie. It would have been amazing. It would have been fantastic. But the interesting thing about the Han Solo versus Indiana Jones argument is that you can say that they never tried to replace Henry Jones, right? Like they never even tried to do that. And I think maybe one of the reasons is because, well, I guess that's not entirely true though. They had the Young Indiana Jones series, which wasn't a replacement, but similar to the Solo movie or similar to the movie Solo, they cast a younger character for the same actor. Yeah. But I would say that The big difference there is Indiana Jones is very clearly the lead character for all four of those movies,
Right.
and the
Right.
upcoming fifth movie, God help us. But Han Solo isn't, he's arguably, well, he's not really arguably, he's not the primary character in the Star Wars saga. It's
No,
not
no,
about
he's not.
him. It's about
No.
the Skywalkers.
Yeah.
It's a really long-winded way of saying I like your pick. That was one of the ones I guessed would certainly be on your list. I felt like that
Okay.
was one of the ones you would lead with, and was most certainly on your article. I'm not sure if it was because I didn't reread it. Shame on me.
Yeah, I think it was. The actor's name is Aiden Eidenreich, is the guy that played Solo. And again, I would agree with you. I actually really enjoyed that movie. I think it gave us a lot of things about the backstory of Han Solo that we didn't really want or didn't really need. I didn't need the genesis of his name. I didn't need the genesis of his dice. I didn't, like that kind of stuff.
That name thing was so terrible.
It was ridiculous.
Oh,
Yeah, it really was. I think that movie came out and got a really bad rap just as kind of a backlash to some of the other Disneyfication of Star Wars and that kind of thing. Star Wars fans, quote unquote, really are kind of some of the worst thing that has happened to Star Wars. When you look at some of the conversations that happen online, that's a whole nother podcast. But
Sure.
Anyways, Harrison Ford is Han Solo in my mind.
Yep.
All right.
I'll take it.
All right.
I'll take it.
What
All right.
What do you got for number 4, sir?
So at number 4, or whatever order we're going in, is an actor that I think will forever be synonymous with this role. And if they ever recast this role, I will be shocked, because I just think that the two were born to be together in R-rated bliss for the rest of their lives. And that is Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool. I think there is no better match. If there was ever an actor who was born to play this role, and clearly he wanted to from the very beginning, if you read up on any of the history of it, the development for this movie actually started in 2004, which was 5 years before he played the same, much less recognizable character in the notoriously hideous X-Men Origins Wolverine movie. So Hugh Jackman's first solo movie. And I think Ryan Reynolds had a totally different idea with what he wanted to do, but he did that movie anyways. But his what's the word? His sardonic wit, his dry humor fits so unbelievably perfect with that character. And the fact that they took that comic book movie and they made it an R-rated blood fest was just so amazing. The first movie was insanely successful. It made $782 million off of a budget of $58 million. That kind of profit is just unheard of. And I think for a while, at least shortly after it came out, was one of the most successful R-rated movies of all time. I don't know if it's a great movie, but it is really fun, and you can tell it was made by somebody who just wants to be that character. And the second movie was, it was pretty decent. I don't know if it lived up to the hype, and I'm just hoping that somehow they can find a way to wedge him in to the Marvel universe somehow. And of course, we'll always be sad that he never got a chance to really do something with Hugh Jackman in true Deadpool form, right? Like, so he was obviously in the X-Men Origins Wolverine movie, but not as the Deadpool that we know today in the red suit and, well, the dialogue, because I don't think he had any in that first movie, especially after the transition. So, yeah. So, I mean, Ryan Reynolds is Deadpool. I just don't know how you could get any more spot on than that.
It's an awesome pick, and I'm kind of pissed at myself that I don't have that on my list, because I couldn't agree with you more. It's absolutely a perfect role for Ryan Reynolds. Yes, I mean he is he's Van Wilder and he's a bunch of other characters as well. But I mean, like, even when you watch him do interviews now, several years after these roles, I'm like, oh yeah, that's Deadpool, right? It's a perfect role.
It's just him without the mask on. I mean, it's the same character, but still really hilarious.
That's a really, really good pick. Okay, let's see. So my next one, these next couple are, I tried to pick stuff that, maybe with the exception of my number one, which I think there will be an overlap at our number one. I tried to pick ones that might be controversial, or there's more than one,
I like that.
Potential choice in there. And this is one that actually, as I'm sitting here I actually went back and I looked at my blog post, and I've actually changed my tune in the years since I wrote that. Bill Murray is an actor that he's got some incredible roles, arguably iconic roles for several of them. He is Peter Venkman now. In my mind, and again, that has changed. Originally, when I wrote the post, I said that he was his character from Stripes. What was his name? John Winger. That has changed though over the years. And I don't know that it's because I have revisited Ghostbusters more often. I don't know if I can't imagine I've grown to love Ghostbusters more, but just when you say Bill Murray to me, he is Pete Venkman. I love that character.
I couldn't ever possibly argue with that. It's a fantastic pick because it was clearly one of the roles that it's one of those roles that when you watch him play that, he didn't have to do a lot of studying. There wasn't a lot of outside the box. Like he is Pete Venkman, right? Like he's just sort of that kind of aloof, but really charming and pretty smart, not deceptively smart character that people just really love. And I'm going to take a quick sidebar here to say I am so freaking jazzed about this next Ghostbusters movie that's coming out. I don't know if you've seen the trailers.
The trailer looks amazing. Yeah.
Shit house crazy. It looks so good. Like I love the vibe. I love the attitude. I am literally praying that they don't fuck this up because I'm so looking forward to this movie. And I cannot wait to see him on screen as Pete Venkman again. It's going to be a dream come true. And even in the second Ghostbusters movie, which is pretty objectively shitty, it's just great. It's great to see him do Pete Venkman things, right? That's what Bill Murray does. And he's an underrated actor, generally speaking, but there's nothing I enjoy more than seeing him embrace everything about Ghostbusters and Pete Venkman.
So I'll put you on the spot here. You mentioned Ghostbusters 2.
Yes. Which
is a better movie, Ghostbusters 2 or Ghostbusters 2016?
If you're going to
seriously, honestly, I'm, like objectively,
I'm not sure if I can answer which one's a better one, but I can say, oh man, I feel like there's going to be a lot of hate mail here, but I can say that I will watch Ghostbusters 2 10 times out of 10 over the Ghostbusters 2016. I didn't care for it. And it has nothing to do with the fact that they threw 4 women in the lead roles versus the men. Right. I was actually excited about that because I wanted them to do something different. I just don't think any of the humor landed for me in any way, shape, or form. It felt like a Saturday Night Live skit that just went 2.5 hours too long.
Right.
And I didn't think it was funny. I didn't think it was original. I appreciated what they tried to do. It just didn't work for me. And I was really disappointed with that. So I'm not a fan of that movie. And yeah, so I'll watch Ghostbusters 2 just because you can at least pull some one-liners out of that movie. Thanks to,
Pete Venkman, Vigo the
Pete
Butch.
Venkman and Ray Stantz and Egon. And yeah, I mean, that's not a great movie, but you've got, what's his name? John McNichols, I think, that plays, is Vigo, like the crazy, eccentric
the Russian guy from Pittsburgh.
Yeah, whatever.
The Upper West Side.
The Upper West Side. Yeah, he's hilarious. That movie has got some charm. Yeah. It lost me when the Statue of Liberty walked through New York like that, right. And they were controlling it with an NES controller, and it was just like, all right, playing some good music, but at the same time, it was just like, oof, that was really bad. Okay. But yeah, no, it's a great pick.
All right, who's up next on your list, sir?
Okay, so I'm going to do something a little bit crazy here, as crazy as we get on this podcast. I actually just changed my third pick about 17 seconds ago.
Wow. Okay.
So I'm shooting completely for the hip, and I'll tell you who I had for my pick. Okay. Until it just totally washed over me and realized, oh crap, I know I need to put in here. So I had Chevy Chase as Fletch because I thought that those two are synonymous with each other. I think but I mean, the argument could be made. Chevy Chase is Clark Griswold. I think that would, Clark Griswold versus Fletch would be a great argument. But for me, I loved Fletch. That was such a great movie when I was growing up. And I don't think anybody could play that to the degree that Chevy Chase did. I know that they talked about rebooting it a handful of years ago. Actually, Kevin Smith was going to try to reboot it. He was going to put Jason Lee in that role, which I actually thought would have been interesting. But I just don't think we would ever have been able to accept anybody else in the role of Fletch. But I changed that because it hit me like a bolt of lightning, and I'm like, oh no, there is an actor who, at least in my opinion, and maybe this is controversial too, and prepare to send me all your DC hate mail. Christopher Reeve as Superman is absolutely the Superman. He is the standard for that role. Nobody has played that better. And I've gotten into arguments, borderline fist fight level arguments with people. I'm like, no, this is exactly how you have to do it. And he did such an amazing job of balancing the goofy, sort of aloof reporter as Clark Kent versus, the Superman role where he was much more confident. And yeah, nobody buys the whole pair of glasses thing, is a good disguise. But there are so many great stories about the making of that movie. And, the fact that they cast a complete unknown for their lead character was such a huge deal. Now, granted, they had Marlon Brando come in and play his dad, but Marlon Brando had maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes of screen time. I mean, it was more than that, but it was very, very minimal. After the opening scene of the movie, he was basically gone, aside from a few holograms later on. But Christopher Reeve, there's a reason that they signed him up for 4 movies. There's a reason that they never would have made any more movies in that era without him. And I think that when you look at everything that came after him, Brandon Routh in Superman Returns and Henry Cavill in The Man of Steel, I just don't think any of them hold a candle. I will say that Brandon Routh got a really bad rap. I really liked him.
I thought it was a good movie. I really did.
I didn't think it was a good movie, but I thought he was good in that role. I thought he did good. I think they tried to vibe too much off of the Richard Donner universe, right? Because they basically came out and said this is a direct sequel to Superman 2. Mm-hmm. And that was sort of an unpopular thing to do at the time. Now we have movies doing that all the time. The new Halloween series, right? That's kicked back up in 2018, I think it was. They basically said, This is a sequel to the original Halloween movie. Just forget all those other ones. So I don't think we were ready to do that when Superman Returns came out. And I think Brandon Routh gets a really bad rap. I think he looked the part. I think he worked well. Henry Cavill's decent too. I didn't care for the Man of Steel movies. That's a whole nother controversial topic someone can yell at me about later, but they just didn't have the heart. And that's, kind of getting back to the center of this. Christopher Reeve brought everything to that role that I love, which is he made you believe a man could fly, but he also made Superman human, if that makes any sense, right? Like he gave him the human element that I felt like he needed. And it was brilliant. And there will never be anything that he'll be known for more than that. And there will never be another Superman, in my opinion, that will be a better representation of him.
So let me ask you a question about, so first of all, I agree with you wholeheartedly about Christopher Reeve. I will kind of go on though from that to say, I don't know that I could, off the top of my head, I don't know that I could tell you another Christopher Reeve performance. And I guess my question is that because he is so awesome as Superman, or is that because he got typecast as Superman and then didn't do shit for the rest of his career? Or, you know what I mean? Like, I don't, and I'm honestly asking. I'm not disagreeing with the choice at all. Because in fact, I might have put him in my original blog post, but it's just interesting. Is he one of those quote one hit wonders?
I think for most people who maybe don't spend a lot of time just watching films, the sort of the average moviegoer probably would agree with you, that he just sort of fizzled after Superman 4 and nothing ever happened. And that's probably not too far from the truth. I want to say that he maybe wasn't as interested in acting after that he wanted to do some more behind the camera kind of stuff.
Okay.
But he did do other movies. He did a movie called Death Trap, which was kind of interesting, with Michael Caine. And he did some, B and C level stuff, I think, as the years went on. But I think it must have been difficult for him to get cast as anything else because he was so iconic in that role. And I
Sure.
just don't think anybody wanted to see him in anything but that role.
Yeah.
Actually, I take that back. The next most iconic movie or iconic role that he probably did was, and this may be a stretch, but there's a movie called Somewhere in Time that he did with Jane Seymour. It was kind of popular. At least I remember my mom really loved that movie.
Okay.
And but no, I mean, he never did anything box office wise that compared to Superman. I think he's the kind of actor that would have had a resurgence, had he still been alive, had he had the opportunity to get back into film, because I think he was really good. I just think he had trouble breaking that mold. And when, think back to the 80s, right? Like we were very set in our ways back then. When somebody was in a movie like that, we didn't really give them much of a chance to do much
you're
else.
Right. You're right.
So, he might have been kind of pigeonholed in that sense. I think that's a fair statement.
Yeah. You just edited your list. I just did the same thing.
Oh, so, get right out of town.
I did. And I edited it partially because of the way you are looking at this list, and because I think that is a really good way to look at this. Again, when I originally proposed it, I said, hey, it is the role that I immediately go to in my mind when somebody gives me an actor's name, and it sounds like you took it and looked at it as, here's a role that couldn't be any other actor, which is, it's kind of right. If I'm hearing it right. And so Robert Downey Jr. is Tony Stark. I will say that it wasn't on my original list. That's because none of the Avenger movies, the MCU, didn't exist back in 2009. But good God, I mean, he plays Iron Man perfectly. He plays Tony Stark, I think, even better than he plays Iron Man. Obviously, it's the same person, or it's the same character. But Robert Downey Jr. as the billionaire, millionaire, playboy, smart, that guy, it's just perfect. Just absolutely perfect. And I cannot picture anybody else in the role of Tony Stark in the MCU.
Yeah, 100% nailed that one for sure. I think they completely hit the nail on the head with him. And one of the great things about watching him in that role is that I feel like, 5 minutes after that first movie started in 2008, I think we were all on board. I think we were all hooked. And it immediately, and I didn't know who Iron Man was. I mean, I'll be the first to admit, I'd heard of Iron Man, sure, but thought it was really brave that Marvel was going to make this movie about this comic book character that nobody really knew anything about, and maybe was only popular because of some cartoons when we were kids, And I couldn't have been more wrong about my expectations about that movie. And Robert Downey Jr., I think Jon Favreau deserves a lot of that credit because he had so much to do with that. And I don't know whose idea specifically it was to cast Robert Downey Jr. I have to think that Favreau had something to do with that, but I'm not sure who it was. But, we have to consider that before 2008, Robert Downey Jr. was stereotyped as sort of this 80s washed up actor, right?
Yep.
Like he was still acting. He was very active in Hollywood, but he was doing movies that were okay. I mean, there were some good movies out there, but they weren't breaking any box office records. And 10 years after Iron Man, he was making $50 million a picture. I mean, it's insane how perfect he was for that role. So that's, you can't argue with that.
And you know what? And this is going to be an insane statement and deserving every bit of that money, right? For how big those movies are. Again, I knew Iron Man, but I don't know that I ever even read, other than a handful of Iron Man comics before that. In fact, I can remember very vividly being and again, this was before we even knew that the quote MCU was going to be a thing. I was like, why the fuck are they making an Iron Man movie? Like this third or fourth tier character. Why would I care about Iron Man? And again, to your point, 12 minutes into that movie, I'm like, oh my God, I'm all in. I want to see this movie. And then of course that blossomed into 27 movies and whatever it is. But again, the MCU, I don't know that the MCU is as successful as it is without Robert Downey Jr.
100%. I don't know that the MCU, we'd still be talking about it. I don't know that there would be an MCU without Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah, because if that movie bombs, I mean, do they make another 22 movies? I don't know that they do.
they don't make another Hulk. They don't make Thor.
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
Right.
he paved the way for all these. I mean, Doctor Strange, Ant-Man, like
Yeah.
Shang-Chi, like all these movies, they would not exist if Iron Man had not been the absolute success that it was. And a
Yeah.
lot of that's due to Robert Downey Jr. for sure. And that's why he deserved $50 million a
Right.
picture,
Right.
because he made them a lot more money than that. Billions of dollars.
Billions and billions.
All the billions.
You got two more. What do you got?
All right, solid choice. So this is one that I guarantee if it's not on both of our lists, then we have failed each other as friends, as best friends. I'll just dive right into it. Robert Englund is Freddy Krueger. There is absolutely no way around this. Now, this is not a surprise to anybody who knows us, anyone who's listened to our podcasts, because we've droned on about horror movies, and who could be more iconic than Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger. Now, you could make an argument who is more iconic as an 80s horror slasher, right? Like you could say Michael Myers versus Jason Voorhees versus Freddy Krueger. I mean, I know who I'd vote for, but you know, those movies were all very popular back in the day. But the one thing that makes Freddy Krueger stand out is that the same actor played him through all those movies and gave him that character. And that's what I think makes him so brilliant and makes the two of these together such a great thing. He's probably the only guy on my list who's arguably not really known for much else. Like you mentioned, who are we talking about? Oh, Christopher Reeve, right? Like most people probably don't know that he acted in other movies. I guarantee most people don't know that Robert Englund has done other things. I mean, I know that you know him from V, but even past that, like, what else has he really done? And the answer is not much. But he brought all this swagger and attitude to this role. You know, he modeled himself after, early versions of Jimmy Cagney. And he really came into this movie right around the third movie, in my opinion, when, it was Dream Warriors, and that's when the movie started getting really good. I mean, the first one was good. The second one was kind of shit. The third one, they went back to the well. They brought Wes Craven back to at least contribute. He wasn't the director and he wasn't the chief story writer, but he was involved in the mix. And they started modulating his voice, and he just got a lot cooler at that point. Now, of course, as Freddy progressed, he got a little bit more game showy. He's basically like David Lee Roth with a burnt face. He's got that shtick, right? But it's evident to me that he is a great choice for this list because they tried to replace him in 2010 when they did the Nightmare on Elm Street reboot, and it didn't work. Like, I think Jackie Earle Haley is a brilliant actor, and he's really, really talented, but he didn't fit. He didn't work for that role. And I don't think that movie was terrible, other than it being sort of a semi-obnoxious shot-for-shot recreation of the original. There were some really good things about that movie, and it should have been a much better movie, but it really wasn't. And I think when you take Robert Englund out of that makeup, it doesn't work. It just doesn't. And so that's why he's on my list. I think I beat you to him because I think he was probably your number one. If I had to guess.
He is. He's my number one. Yes. And again, here's why he's my number one. He fits both of our definitions of what this list is, right? He is, if you say Robert Englund, you think Freddy Krueger. If you say Freddy Krueger, you think Robert Englund. There's not a person other than maybe Jackie Haley that when you say Freddy Krueger, he thinks Jackie Haley. Like, you think Robert Englund. They are synonymous.
Right.
And you're right. And I think you might have liked that reboot even better than I did. I didn't care for it at all. I will give Haley some credit in that he tried to do some things that were a little bit different. He tried to make that character a little bit darker and more real and this, that, and the other thing. But that's just not Freddy Krueger. And the reason it's not is because of how goddamn good Robert Englund is in that role. I mean, we have met the man twice now, you and I both, and even to see him standing across the room or to shake his hand, even when he's out of character, that character is right beneath the surface, right? And it's not just because he looks like him, right? It's him. I cannot explain it. It's an aura that dude has. And that character, even when he went super slapsticky in the last 3 or 4 movies, those movies are still watchable and rewatchable because of the performances that Robert Englund gives, even when he's being slapsticky used car salesman Freddy.
Yeah.
If you were to put somebody else in those roles or in that role with that same script, it goes from kind of a campy version of Freddy Krueger to a, like, police academy in Moscow level or shit. You know what I mean? Like, seriously, right?
No, that's awesome. You're spot on.
It gets really, really bad really, really quickly. And yeah, those last few movies are not great, but they're still watchable, and it's 100% because of Robert Englund. I again, couldn't agree with you more. That's my number one.
Yeah, and that's it's funny because he did get pretty campy towards the end, and it got obnoxious, and people are like, okay, we've all had enough. And then Wes Craven's New Nightmare came out, and
so good.
You can argue whether that's a good movie or not. I think I enjoy it. I've heard a lot of people say that it's not a good movie, but I will say that one thing I don't feel like you can argue is that when he shows up as sort of this new version of Freddy on screen, and he tries to be terrifying, and he takes some of that campy humor out of it, it's amazing. And I'm like, why didn't we have 10 more years of this? Because it was spot on. It was terrifying. That scene in that movie where they're in the hospital with the kid and the babysitter, and they do this sort of
redo the scene,
homage to the scene from the first movie. It's so good, and it's terrifying. I mean, it's really, really gory, and it's really, really good. So I mean, he's brilliant.
And I would carry that same thought forward into Freddy versus Jason, which is one of my favorite horror movies ever. And yes, they have swapped out the actor for Jason, but Robert Englund is there. And Robert Englund really kind of is the anchor to that movie, in my opinion, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that is a very kind of ensemble cast. And Freddy is not even really in that movie all that much. But when he is back on the screen, you're back in that world, right? He anchors the horror aspect of that movie, because it's like, oh yeah, here's our kind of North Star that is Freddy Krueger in that movie. I don't know, I'm kind of rambling, but I think
it makes perfect sense. Yeah, you can have 7 or 8 different Jasons, you can have 7 or 8 different Michael Myers. You cannot do that with Freddy Krueger. Yeah, and that's just because he has dialogue, which the other ones don't. It's the way that he does and plays that character. And I did like 2010's reboot more than you did. I don't know that I will go as far as to say that I liked it, but I thought the dream sequences were really good. And I was really excited to see sort of a new take on A Nightmare on Elm Street with special effects that would actually support the idea of, dream sequences and things like that. And I think they did a good job with some of that. I don't think overall it's a great movie, just because I would have rather them started from fresh and not done anything related to the first movie. Like, they could have just completely written a different story, and I would have been more interested. It's because they lean so heavily from the first one to the point where they actually recreated, like, the bathtub scene and some other, and the scene with, the whole getting torn across the ceiling and all that stuff. And it's just like, why are you half in and half out? Like, either go full in or full out. Like, it just didn't, it took me out of it, I think.
Yeah, no, I would agree. All right, so we did kind of your number 2 and my number 1 together, so we got one left. What do you got?
Well, my number 1, I think, is your number 2 or your number 3. I don't remember which one. We're getting through the order, but it's Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. Like that, I mean, that is just as definitive as anything else. Now, Robert Englund isn't known for anything past Freddy Krueger. Robert Downey Jr. has certainly been in many more movies, but I don't think anything is as iconic as Iron Man. It just won't be. And we already talked about this, so I won't kind of go into a super huge level of detail, but I mean, he's so brilliant with this comedic timing, but he knows how to turn on the real acting chops when he's called upon. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I shed some tears in Endgame when he dies, and it's just, it was intensely emotional, and I thought it was brilliant. And I swear to God, I heard him say on the Ellen show the other day that they're going to make an Iron Man 4. And I don't know what that means.
Wow, really?
I don't know how
I
they
didn't know
do
that.
that, but apparently he's coming back and he is going to play Iron Man one more time, which, most of the time I just roll my eyes and be like, oh God, this is fucking pathetic. But I'm super psyched. Like,
Oh, that's amazing. I hadn't heard that. That's
yeah,
well, I suppose
apparently.
they could do anything with multiverse, right? If they're gonna do that.
Well, yeah, we could get into that on another podcast. But when you introduce multiverses and time travel, you remove all the stakes from the story, and
Well,
that
that's
kind of
true too. Yeah.
that makes it less impactful. So I fear for what that's actually going to be. And if I'm being completely honest, Iron Man 1's the only Iron Man movie I liked. I didn't care for the second one. I did not care for the third one. He was
Yeah.
great in the Avengers movies and Civil War and all the those movies that he did after that. But I didn't think the other Iron Man movies were that great.
I enjoyed the second one. I didn't care for the third one. But yeah, that's you're right. That's another podcast
But
altogether.
that doesn't really
Okay.
matter. The point
Yeah.
is that Robert Downey Jr. has absolutely perfected that role. The last thing that he ever says on screen is "I am Iron Man," and nothing could be more appropriate.
Yep. No, I would agree. I would agree completely. So let's see. I mentioned to you that I swapped out during this podcast, and I'm glad I did. I put Iron Man. Actually, he was my number 2. So he was our
Okay.
number 1 and 2 were flipped, which I think is very apropos.
So
And I
before
guess
you go any further, we have
Yes.
what, 3 overlaps or just 2? We have Robert
Um,
Downey Jr., we have Robert Englund. I think that's it. So we just have
That's
2
it.
at this point.
That's
okay.
That's it. Yes.
All right.
So the one that I swapped him out for, and so I'm going to tell you this, and then I'll hit you with a couple of rapid fires.
I got a couple rapid fires for you as well.
Okay.
In the last like 10 minutes while you were talking,
Okay.
I wrote down 5 names, and I'm going to make you tell me their definitive.
Okay.
role.
Okay. Oh, that's awesome. I did the same thing. I've been writing, and for everybody that's listening, we didn't talk about this before, so this will be cool. So the one that I swapped him out for was Keanu Reeves as Neo. And there's a bunch of other roles in there, but in my mind, Keanu Reeves is Neo, especially with the upcoming, the next installation of The Matrix, which, you know what? I was not excited at all for another entry to the Matrix series because I didn't really care for the second one. I hated the third one, but you know what? That trailer is amazing, and I cannot wait to see it.
I can't decide how I feel about the trailer. I mean, first of all, yes, I think that's great. Although it's funny because you've made me already change my rapid fire because I was going to give you Keanu Reeves and you just ruined it for me.
Sorry.
Because I think arguably Keanu Reeves could be he could be
It would
Ted.
be, if it's not that, it would be John Wick. If it's not Neo, it would be John Wick for me.
It could be Ted from Bill and Ted. It could be Johnny Utah from Point Break.
Yeah.
I mean, come on,
Yeah.
man. Keanu Reeves. Don't even get me started on my love affair for Keanu. No, that's certainly a great pick. But I'm not sure how I feel about the trailer. I think I'm more excited about the movie than I thought I was going to be because it seems so different. If I felt like it was just an obnoxious reboot of the third movie or an obnoxious reboot of the first movie or some kind of lame continuation of the third, I would probably just not even be interested in watching it. But when I saw the trailer, I'm like, well, this doesn't make any sense and I can't really follow what's going on. But that's what I really like because it doesn't compute so far.
I from what and again, I've only watched the trailer maybe twice. I haven't gone back and dissected it or anything like that. Based on what I'm seeing, he is cognizant of everything that happened in the first 3 movies. And so the question becomes, did he dream it? Was he in the Matrix? Was he not? And so if I had to guess, it sounds like they're going to explore whether or not he was actually in the Matrix versus dreaming versus what's real, this, that. So I don't know. But I was, like I said, I was all out after the third one, and now I'm all in. I'm really looking forward to it. I can't wait.
Yeah, no, I'm same. In fact, I'm so excited about it. I'm going to try to see it in the theaters because I feel like a movie like that deserves to be seen in the theaters. And I know that that's not totally apropos these days, but I feel like theaters have gone out of their way to try to make those environments super clean. And to be honest, there's still not a lot of people going these days. So I'm not personally worried about my safety, but I want to urge people to go back to the damn movies
Me too.
because we
Me
need
too.
this. Like
Yes.
if this medium goes away, I don't want to be sitting in front of my TV watching digital versions of all these movies in the future. I think it would be terrible. It would break my heart. So I really sincerely hope that, people go see these movies in the theaters. I'm going to go see Halloween Kills in the theaters. I'm going to go see the new Spider-Man movie in the theaters. I'm going to go see the new Matrix movie in the theaters. I'll come back and I'll rewatch them all on digital, but I want to make sure they get my money. That's important to me. And I want to make sure that I see it in the format and the audio and the visual that it was intended to be seen in.
All right. So you want to do a couple rapid fires?
Yeah, let's do it.
How many do you got?
So I had 5, and then you fucked me with the whole Keanu Reeves thing. So I'm desperately trying to, I'm just trying to think of actors off the top of my head because I've got 4 other ones, but
okay.
Maybe,
here's what's going to happen. We're going to overlap anyways. So
yeah, we're going to overlap yet again, probably.
Okay.
So,
I'll give you a softball first. How about that?
All right. I like softballs.
Okay. Steve Guttenberg.
Oh, Jesus Christ. That's not a softball.
Okay.
3 Men in a Big. No, I'm just kidding. he's Carrie Mahoney from all the Police Academy movies.
Okay. He is Carrie Mahoney. Okay.
That was the softest of balls, by the way.
It was. Sylvester Stallone.
Oh, see, I was gonna put that for you. It's Rocky Balboa. It has to be Rocky Balboa.
Yeah. You could make a case for John Rambo, but yeah, he is Rocky Balboa.
For sure. He won a fucking Oscar for it, right? So,
right.
You have to.
But here's, it's funny though. I know that Rocky, the original Rocky, is by far the best quote film. It's not remotely close to my favorite of the series. Rocky IV is the movie in my mind.
Rocky IV is the 80s version of the Rocky story. Yeah. No, it's my favorite, but I can recognize it's not the best.
No, it's not. No. Yeah.
But yes, I agree. Did you notice how he mysteriously loses his Yo Adrian accent in that? Like all of a sudden he can talk like a perfectly articulate human being.
It's funny how that works, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, all right. Matthew Broderick.
It's Ferris Bueller all day long.
It's fair.
These are softballs. Come on, give me a hard one.
Okay. So no more softballs. I'm gonna give you 3 difficult ones. Okay. All right. Tom Hanks.
I think Forrest Gump.
Okay.
That actually not my favorite.
My pick. Yeah.
But I think that's the one.
Okay. Tom Cruise.
Oh, you son of a bitch! That was on my list too. Tom Cruise has got to be. This is. I don't know if this is going to go over well, but I'm going to have to say Ethan Hunt. I think
Really?
Mission Impossible. Okay. I think. Top Gun is certainly more iconic, but he's done 6 movies, and he's got a 7th one coming, or is it 5 movies and a 6th one coming? I don't know.
I've seen exactly 0 of those movies.
Really?
None, ever.
They're good movies.
Yeah. I've never seen. But again, I know that he is Ethan Hunt. But yeah, to me, he's Pete Mitchell.
He's Maverick. That's probably true. That's fair.
All right, so you want one more that's not a softball. How about Sean Connery?
He's James Bond.
Yeah,
he's got to be James Bond. I think that one's a hard one to argue for sure.
It's tough. Okay, I got more, but go ahead. If you want to fire away. I'll take it.
All right, I'll do it. I'm not sure if mine are going to be better, but there's a couple of them that may be a little tricky. Arnold Schwarzenegger.
The guy from Commando, John.
Seriously? Really?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yes. Yes. Before Predator. Yes. The guy from Commando.
What about the Terminator?
No.
No, he's done 6 of those movies.
No. Again, that's who I think of.
Okay. Hey, I'm not here to argue, but the guy from Commando. You couldn't even remember his fucking name, but he's more. That's what you're going with.
Yep. Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
Holy shit. Here we go. Okay. Robert De Niro.
Robert De Niro. Wow.
That one's tough because he's played he's an iconic actor, but not played a lot of iconic character. Well, I don't know if that's true.
Yeah. Jimmy from Goodfellas. Jimmy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Nicolas Cage.
Oh, fuck, I don't remember the character from The Rock. He's like the FBI or Secret Service guy
Yeah.
from The Rock.
Okay. This one's I think this one might be an interesting pull. Ed Norton.
Fight Club, the narrator
Okay.
from Fight Club.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the narrator. Good call. Good call.
Yeah.
He does not have a name. And then my last one, maybe a little bit of a softball, but there's some good choices to pick from. Jack Nicholson.
The Joker.
Really?
Yeah.
More so
Yeah.
than The Shining.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow,
Yes, the Joker.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Again, The Shining, as you know, is one of my kind of top 3 all-time horror movies. But yeah, he is the Joker.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was good. That was fun. I like that because it was really sort of shooting from the hip there a little bit.
And again, for all the people that are listening, the fact that we just totally stumbled through that should be proof that we didn't set it up, and I don't even fucking know the guy's name from Commando.
The guy's name.
It's
John Commando. John Commando is his name.
It's funny, Pip. I'll tell you, I didn't even when you said Schwarzenegger, I didn't even consider Terminator. It didn't even cross my mind. I'm being totally honest with you.
Blows me away because I feel like that's his most iconic role, probably because he played it so many times. But it's funny because you sent me Stallone, so I thought for sure you were going to set me up with Schwarzenegger, or you were at least going to expect that to come back. But it's funny that you started with Stallone and I started with Schwarzenegger. Both.
How about Bruce Willis? Right.
I thought about that. I mean, that's got to be John McClane. I mean, what movie role has he played that's more credible than that? But what about your Mel Gibson? What do you say about that? You're going to say Braveheart, but are you really going to say he's bigger than Martin Riggs?
Oh no, Martin Riggs is clearly the most iconic role. I think. I was just watching Lethal Weapon the other night.
Really?
Last night, as a matter of fact, I was watching Lethal Weapon 2, which is funny because 2 days before I was watching, what movie was it? I put it on my Instagram. Die Hard 2. Die Hard 2. There's a scene early in the movie where there's a little old lady reading a magazine on an airplane, and they scroll to it, and it is Riggs and Murtaugh on the cover of that magazine. Yeah, Mel Gibson is Martin Riggs. Yeah, William Wallace is probably my favorite role of his, but yeah, Martin Riggs for sure.
Richard Donner, rest in peace. Lots of shout outs on this podcast tonight.
All right. Well, this was fun. I wasn't quite sure where we were going to go with this or how it would work, but it turned out to be a pretty good conversation. Next up is your pick, sir.
Oh, shit.
Well, but you know what? Hey, we're only 2 weeks out from Halloween Kills. I don't know that I think we got to review Halloween, right? I mean,
we have to do something scary movie related. Like we talked about potentially dipping our toes into a retrospective of some kind, which I would be really interested in. But that's going to be tough if we're going to do deep dives on 8 different movies of a specific one. Like we don't have the time to launch all those by Halloween. We'll come up with something for sure. But I think that Halloween themes are going to be a big talking point for the month of October.
For the foreseeable future here, huh?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that being said, thank you very much for your time. I've been joined once again by my brother from another mother, Mr. Pip. My name is Chewie. This has been the 401 Bun from 406. Thanks for joining us, folks. We'll talk to you soon.
Have a good night, everyone.